With the announcement of Monster Hunter Wilds came the call to return to World. A game that is almost 6 years old now and still manages to get some amazing player numbers and genuinely still holds up in terms of quality. Were it any other game, hell, were it any other Monster Hunter game, I doubt players would have surged back to the game with so little effort. A game that was so good that it turned a niche franchise with a genuinely cult-like following into a gaming-wide phenomenon. I won't waste your time with an explanation on what Monster Hunter is. If you are truly new to the series and clicked on this video because you heard of the growing player base, or hell, maybe you got interested in the series through streamers such as MHWorld, and really have no idea what the series is about, then I have an excellent video explaining the general idea of the series and what it is about. It may be a bit cringe, since I did not know much about editing back then, but if you can overlook that, I truly think it's an excellent start. Shilling myself out of the way, let's get to the meat and potions of it. World came out in January 2018 on console 2 years after the last Western Monster Hunter release on 3DS. So not only was the community starving for more Monster Hunter, but with the announcement that Monster Hunter was no longer tethered to Nintendo systems and instead came to the big screens, the Western community was in an uproar. It was such a huge difference that we couldn't even believe it even though we saw it. You cannot tell me you weren't getting goosebumps when Proof of a Hero started blasting.
Monster Hunter!
We were going stir crazy. I myself remember watching this goddamn E3 reveal, RIP by the way, every single goddamn day for almost a month. The wider gaming community was also for the first time setting their sights on Monster Hunter like a hungry Nargacuga, cautious but ready to pounce. The older fans already knew that they were in for a treat, since for us, graphics were secondary to the gameplay. But for everybody else, Nintendo 3DS graphics were enough to not even give it the time of day. So with this game looking really impressive, with at the time really good graphics that still hold up, people were more inclined to look into it. Something to note is that Monster Hunter as a franchise always put a lot more emphasis on the creatures and the world itself. Monster designs were specifically made to fit in with the environment they're supposed to inhabit, but interactions with said habitat would usually be very limited, with few exceptions. But in the reveal trailer alone, World showed that the focus on interactions with the environment would be a lot deeper and more intricate than ever before for both the monsters and hunters. The possibilities seemed endless, discussions were rampant, and excitement grew. Newcomers wanted to know more, and the few Monster Hunter YouTubers that existed made videos talking about what Monster Hunter is, just so that new players would know what they are getting into. And people almost inhaled those videos like a Yamatsukami about to float away. Come the time of release, the excitement was at a fever pitch. People had replayed older games, me personally going through Monster Hunter Generations just to scratch that itch. And then, there it was. People were clamoring to play, and after a mere week of release, the game surpassed 5 million units sold. A number so huge it was almost unheard of for the community. Veterans of the franchise were overjoyed with seeing how far the game had come ever since its days as a niche experience with a cult following that would advertise itself more through word of mouth rather than with ads. Newcomers would either really like the game or really hate it. And then there were those that kept comparing it to Dark Souls. I can see where they're coming from, and there are definitely some comparisons to be made, but comparing them the way they were compared, mainly just mentioning the difficulty and how the combat felt clunky, just felt lazy and was met with the matching disdain. It ignored so much of what made both unique in their respective areas and just muddled the intricacies of both just to lump them into the genre of hard game is hard. But let's explore their intricacies just a tiny minute eensy weensy bit. See, what set Monster Hunter apart from games such as the Soul series was the aforementioned care put into making the game truly a believable world. Gone were the mythical dragons and the magical items, and in were the wyverns and the medical potions made with ground up herbs and honey. Out was the trial and error of having to learn a Souls-like boss, and in was the intuition of seeing the separate body parts of a monster and inferring what they could do simply by looking at them. Here, you would even be able to go full-on Boy Scout and track the monster via tracks left in the areas, and while you did that, you would encounter smaller creatures just living their lives, not caring about what you are doing, which was a new addition to the franchise. Endemic life. Created to flesh out the world more and liven up the already immensely intricate areas the hunter operated in. By the way, the Guild's Knight don't want you to know this, but the endemic life in the areas are free. You can take them home. I have 485 woodland pterics. These little critters can also be displayed in your rooms as pets. Rooms which you can customize once you reach the Iceborne expansion. But the more alive world also counts for the large monsters. Well, in the old games they would mostly just wander around and do some smaller idle animations, or in some cases kill some herbivores. Here, the monsters actually interacted with each other and the world at large. For example, Kushal Daora, the elder dragon that controls wind and ice in some games, being able to use the vents in the Elder's Recess to create more tornadoes. This made a lot of the veterans really happy about how the thing that most of us grew to love just got even better. The Monster Hunter developer team even was bold enough to introduce a new type of quest: sieges. Sieges span across multiple runs of that same quest, and each time you complete a run and complete certain objectives within that quest, the amount and rarity of rewards for once you finally finish a siege would go up and up. So far we've had like 2 sieges. Those being Clove to Wrath, a giant goat lizard thing that the internet likes a bit too much, and Safijiva, the most basic bitch looking dragon out there, but genuinely one of the coolest ideas brought to the game. With these sieges came special rewards, such as simply better armor or even evolvable armor. Monster Hunter World also managed to do what the franchise hasn't done since Monster Hunter 4. It gave players a true rival, an antagonist, a target that would continuously earn our ire. World also invested a lot more into creating a proper story to follow, and for Monster Hunter, a game that in the past had some great lore and world building, but lacked a story that would be in the forefront, it was pretty decent. Sure, it did many things wrong, but for something that excelled in all the departments that mattered, trying to remedy the issues of storytelling was worth a shot. The story also continued throughout the free DLC that were released after, and a new story was added in the now first time ever expansion that did not require you to rebuy the entire game and transfer your save, which made it more accessible to more people. And speaking of accessibility, the game was made to onboard a whole new generation of players entering the beautifully harsh world of Monster Hunter. But with how strenuous it was to get more widespread appeal in the past, changes had to be made. The first and most obvious one, of course, was to let the game out of Nintendo's jar and out into the open for PlayStation, Xbox and PC players to enjoy. More people were thus able to get their necks snapped by the scoutflies who replaced the old paintball system. This was a very welcome addition to the hunting process, as in the past, you could run around with an unsnapped neck. You had to run around the map and then use a paintball to mark the monster, which put a dot on the map for you to follow. This was quite tedious, as unless you hunted the monster for the first time, it would slowly move around the map, which could extend the actual finding of the monster part to multiple minutes. And while you could eventually just memorize which monster would spawn naturally, it was not the most ideal system. Monster Hunter World would do away with the paintballs and instead gave you a jar of fireflies that you would throw all kinds of shit into, from a little bit of dirt to snot or something for the scoutflies to get the scent of. This made the tracking part more streamlined and, in my humble opinion, more accurate to the actual hunting part of the monster hunting fantasy that the devs wanted to convey. And while you're out hunting, you could eventually run out of a certain item that you needed to continue the hunt, such as potions. This would obviously be an issue for any given hunt if you ran out, and the faint card cats were licking their lips just waiting for you to faint that third and last time. While hunters could prepare for that inevitability by using combo books and items to recombine those potions, this obviously could lead to less prepared players to run into maybe a permanent wall. And that is why the huge change of being able to restock your items was introduced. They also introduced multiple camps for you to fast travel to. Entering the camp would remove all blights, top up your weapon sharpness, fully heal you, and now allow you to restock any and all items or even swap out your weapons. Weapons now also sport damage numbers that give you feedback on how much damage a hit did. And surprisingly, it has even quite a lot of info. Not only does it tell you if it was a critical hit or not based on the color of the numbers, but it also shows you if the weapon affinity decreased the damage or not based on that small little arrow on the damage numbers. In the past, all you had to go off of were the amount of blood that came out of monsters and the color of the hit. A critical hit would at times be purple instead of the regular blood red. Or the other way around, I'm not quite sure, I don't remember, it's been a while. Weapons also now have their possible next moves displayed in the top right of the screen, so there's no more guessing on if there are some secret combos or not. They also now have tutorial videos and a difficulty scale on how easy it is to use any given weapon represented by stars. The more stars there are, the easier it is, but I'll be honest here, that is total and utter bullshit. All of the weapons are hard to learn, and the star difficulty thing doesn't even properly apply. They say that the SNS is middling to easy to use for newcomers, which is very wrong. If you don't know how to use the SNS, you will immediately get your shit pushed in. Sure, it may be the starter weapon, but as Joecat has said so aptly in his old video, it can do everything every other weapon can 50 times better. But only if you do know how to use that weapon properly. And then they give the hammer a 2-star ease of use scale, which makes no sense since the hammer is legitimately just charge and hit. It doesn't take much to know how to hit something with a hammer. It simply makes no sense. Ease of use for the hammer should be 3 stars, but they give it 2 stars. And then they give Lance the only 1 star out of the entire selection? Sure, Lance is not the easiest, but it's also not the hardest, if anything. It makes no sense. They feel arbitrarily chosen. But at the very least, they did add an easy mode to the game, so for those who are having issues with weapons can just turn that on. And if you don't know how to turn it on, simply equip the longsword. And even outside of quests, they made forging weapons and armor more streamlined, and some would even argue easier, as both now mostly required items from one monster only. Armor is also no longer parted into Blade Master and Gunner armors, and skills have been changed from an all or nothing system to incremental increases depending on how many skill points you have for any given skill. And there are many other changes, such as the introduction of mantles, making palicos actually do what they're being paid to do, or making decos the RNG drops instead of charms. And so many more that we would be here for a day if I kept going. Some other changes include various options for cloud blindnesses, less VFX to make things clearer, a silhouette for the hunter, and either the target or focus camera. The difference being that the focus camera constantly keeps the camera on the monster, and the target camera requires you to press the left bumper button on a controller to snap the camera to the monster. All of these changes made the game just more accessible to new players, and made the old gameplay loop more convenient for veterans of the franchise. Sure, there are those that have concerns about the game being made too easy or too casual, and depending on how you look at these quality of life changes, they may even be right. But let's be honest here, who the hell wants to hunt lava Seoth just because you want to make a Teostra weapon, but for some inexplicable reason, this weapon from a lion dragon requires 5 Lavasioth toenails? I personally do not believe that the game was made too casual or too easy. I think we all remember Hunter Rank 49 Tempered Kirin, or all of Iceborne. The challenge that was posed to you as a player was almost perfectly scaled. When it wasn't, it was specifically done to make you rethink your approach. Take Tempered Kirin for example. So many guides were made specifically to combat it. Up until that point in the game, you could essentially cruise by with barely any issues. Now you needed to prepare. Now you needed to steel yourself. Wear that Thunderproof mantle and equip those Thunder Resist decos just to get a chance to survive its thunder attacks. And it just scaled from there. Even after finishing the game at the time where you would think the game would get easier since you reached the end, it slaps you in the face like a Rajang slapping you with a boulder. So, small side note here, I actually decided to play the game for the first time on PC, and this time only use weapons that I haven't used in a decade or longer, and it went horribly. It actually got so embarrassing to me that it took me way too long to do simple quests due to how relentless some fights were, and how I didn't get a good grasp on weapons like the greatsword or gunlance, that I decided to save myself the embarrassment and switch back to my go-to weaponry. This of course has been a thing in Monster Hunter games for forever, but this time the difference is that Monster Hunter World was made to be a kind of live service game. See, in the past you would get special event quests as post-launch support, some of which would add new monsters, others would add new special gear or collabs. Usually these would only be supplemental to the actual endgame, but here these post-launch updates would actually constantly expand the endgame with new tempered and eventually arch-tempered monsters that would add new gear, new decos and new moves to the monsters that would make the experience fresh and exciting. And all of that for the great price of free. The game wasn't perfect though. Base World had some truly boring fights. I think we can all remember Zora Magdaros and how much Xeno'jiiva dragged on. The deco grind was frowned upon by quite a lot of people. The handler was quite literally the worst thing since the Great Dragon War. Most of the monster roster lacked diversity, cutscenes being unskippable and actually hindering you from joining your friends in multiplayer felt unnecessary. The slow creep in of microtransactions and how it actually got worse in the next Monster Hunter release was disappointing to witness, and the actual butchering of the weapon designs was genuinely devastating to realize and infuriating to bear. At the very least, it was changed a little bit with the Iceborne expansion, but good lord, I hope that is a change that stays in the 5th generation of Monster Hunter and does not make a return in the 6th generation. Honestly, World, and by extension World Iceborne, elevated an already excellent and one of the most consumer-friendly franchises in the world to an outright franchise for the history books. A way to do live servers kind of right. Hell, how many games can you name that have multiple themes per enemy that would seamlessly interchange depending on whether you're fighting, running, or riding a monster? I doubt you can name any. Or many, for that matter. Monster Hunter World changed the series forever. It changed Capcom forever. Well, Monster Hunter was already the one franchise that literally never missed and kept Capcom afloat when their game output was not the best. It now is not simply being relegated to the depths of Capcom's marketing. They are proudly presenting the game and the team to us. Look at them. Look at these chads chilling in the hot springs. Fucking ballers, all of them. The game was so well received that at least one game that came out afterwards really tried to compete with Monster Hunter in the scarce monster hunting game genre. Previously there were games such as God Eater or Dauntless, but neither really were able to capture what made the hunting genre as well as Monster Hunter did. And it shows because, I mean, do you hear anyone talk about them anymore? Not me. That's for sure. But Wild Hearts came really close. And if this resurgence to Monster Hunter World is any indicator, it's that there is still interest in these games, obviously. So if EA actually did something about it and made like a rallying cry for Wild Hearts and actually updated it and gave it the changes that it needed, I think Wild Hearts would actually make a pretty good competitor to Monster Hunter because it genuinely brought fresh new ideas to the genre. It just never got the support and a horrible launch state. I really hope that Wild Hearts can hopefully get another chance. Monster Hunter has changed. Monster Hunter has always been changing. A thing that the dev team behind Monster Hunter has never changed though, is the fact that they always listen to feedback and will rectify it with their next release, and go even further beyond by adding new gimmicks that will inspire and delight. A thing so rare in the gaming industry as a whole that it is definitely worth mentioning. In fact, for that, they deserve the world.